Hello and welcome to Crime Bytes, the show where we talk about some truly bizarre and disturbing crime cases. My name is Liz and today is True Crime Tuesday. So last month we talked about mothers who murder, with May being Mother's Day month, and to kick off June I'm going to tell you another story about another mother-to-be named Laci. Now, at the time of our story, Laci is 27 and 8 months pregnant with her first child, a baby boy who she was anxiously expecting with her husband. They didn't have the easiest time getting pregnant and even had gone as far as talking about fertility treatments or adopting to start their family. So they were both eagerly awaiting the birth of their son. Laci met her husband in 1994 when she would frequent a restaurant in Morro Bay in California where her friend worked. It didn't take long before she was handing her phone number to her friend's very attractive coworker, and 2 years later the couple would marry and move to Laci's hometown of Modesto. Although Laci's husband had aspirations to become a professional golfer, he got into business and took a job for a new European fertilizer company, and Laci took work as a substitute teacher while she really got into what could be described as housewife activities. She grew up on a dairy farm with her mom, dad, and brother Brent, so although she was having a difficult pregnancy, she was looking forward to realizing this dream of motherhood that she had since she was a little girl. She was trying to take it as easy as she could as her due date approached. Now we're going to meet another mom. Her name is Amber. Amber is a 27-year-old massage therapist and mother to her year-old daughter, Ayana. Recently, she just started seeing a handsome man who she had met through a mutual friend who thought they would hit it off, and it turns out her friend was Frey. Not only was he handsome, attentive, and got to travel the world for work, he also was accepting of her daughter and talked about raising her as his own. He even gave her a book about raising children to show her how invested he was. It was looking too good to be true until on December 9th, about 3 weeks after they started dating, when Amber would receive a call saying they had to talk. That's never fun. And when she showed up, he was in bad shape, and she would describe him as inconsolable. He would tell her that he wasn't completely honest with her and that he had in fact been married before and that he had lost his wife and that this would be the first Christmas that he would spend without her. Amber believed him, and although a little unnerved by his dishonesty, accepted his explanation and focused more on consoling him because of how worked up about it he was. She didn't even ask him how his wife died. And really, he was so invested in their new relationship that she decided to overlook this red flag. So they would continue their relationship and things would continue to go well, as you can see from this picture from Amber's Christmas party on December 14th. Now we are going to fast forward to Christmas Eve. A few different stories get told about what goes on, but what we do know for sure is that right around 10:30 a.m., Laci's neighbor Karen would find their dog Mackenzie wandering around on her leash without anyone walking her. Karen knew it was their dog, so she put it back in their yard, and since she didn't see anyone, she just left. Laci's husband decided to spend the day fishing, and when he got home, he noticed the dog in the yard, and Laci's car was there, but she wasn't. Now, she was supposed to go to her mother's that evening for Christmas Eve dinner, so assuming that's where she was, he hopped in the shower and had some pizza. After settling in, he decided to check up on Laci, and that's when he finds out that she isn't in fact at her mother's. He calls her mother, and when she's not there, he responds, then she's missing. He would report her missing, and when the police would arrive at their house, they would find Laci's keys and wallet in a purse that was in her closet. A search would begin for Laci, and the first person questioned, obviously, was her husband. He was forthcoming with them, providing times and receipts from the marina, but then would refuse to take a lie detector test, which never looks good. At first, he agreed to it, but then refused after his lawyer advised against it. Then a friend would show Amber a news article that would make her blood run cold. It was an article about Laci's disappearance, which obviously was very disturbing since it was a local pregnant woman who just disappeared. But what was especially disturbing to Amber is that the man who was pleading with the public to bring his wife home was her new boyfriend, Scott. After coming to terms with what was going on, Amber called the police. She would cooperate fully with the police, and the first thing they did was wiretap the phone calls that she had with Scott. Now, at this point, Scott was pleading with the public to bring his wife home with her family. While he was doing this, and Amber has a front row seat to this show, she has to pretend she doesn't know. So she calls him on New Year's, and he is actually attending a candlelight vigil for Laci when they have this conversation.
Hi.
Amber. Amber.
I can hear you.
Amber, if you can hear me, it's New Year's.
I know. I can hear you.
Amber, it's New Year's here. Are you there?
Yes. Are you having a good time?
Amber. Hey, Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year.
I wanted to call you.
Thank you.
Amber, you there?
I'm here.
Amber,
I wish you could hear me.
I'm on the, I think that you're there. I'm near the Eiffel Tower. New Year's celebration is unreal. The crowd is huge.
The crowd's huge?
Amber.
Yes, I'm here.
Amber, if you're there, I can't hear you right now, but I'll call you on your New Year's.
Okay, I'll hear from you then.
Amber. Amber, miss you. I'll see you soon.
Okay. I hope.
So clearly, Scotty Boy here is a liar and possibly a murderer. Here are a few other details that don't look very good for him. The book he gave Amber about children was actually a gift he received at his son's baby shower. And remember that cute picture of Scott and Amber at her Christmas party? Here's a couple more. Well, here is Laci at her Christmas party because Scott told her he was out with his boss when he was out with Amber. So here she is all alone at her Christmas party. And then the day he told Amber about his wife that he lost, weeks before he actually lost her, it only came about because a friend of hers found out he was married and threatened to tell her if he didn't come clean. So he came up with that story, and it seems then he decided to make it happen because right after he called Amber to tell her they needed to talk, he was searching on his computer for the tidal patterns in the San Francisco Bay. And wouldn't you know it, on April 13th of 2003, the remains of a baby boy would wash up on the San Francisco Bay beach. The next day, a torso would wash up because they had been in the water for over, a couple months. Laci's head and limbs were missing and wouldn't be recovered. The exact cause of death was also unable to be determined. It was determined that the baby was protected inside of her body for most of that time and had come out only shortly before they were both discovered. There was also a plastic bag with some cement that washed up with the remains. And before they could even identify the bodies, they went looking for Scott. And at that point, they had a tracker on his car and were able to pull him over because he was driving very erratically when they went looking for him. When they did, they discovered him with $15,000 in cash, his brother's license, a new hair color and facial hair, and a bag with some disturbing items, including a double-edged dagger, ropes, Viagra, MapQuest directions to Amber Frey's house. It is now believed that he may have been planning to take her life as well because at this point he knew she was working with the police. So he's arrested and charged with capital murder on April 18th of 2003. Now, let's go quickly back to the plastic bags with the cement that were found with Laci's remains. Remember how Scott was out on the San Francisco Bay on the day that Laci disappeared? Well, he also had made some cement anchors that were homemade for his boat. He admitted to making one of them with 8 pounds of cement from a 90-pound bag that he purchased. This isn't that unusual for people who are into boating, but when asked what he did with the rest of the cement, he at first would say that he threw it away. Then he would say he used it to fill a hole in his driveway, but that he had only made one anchor. Now, here's a picture of the hole that he said he filled with the remaining 82 pounds of cement. I'm thinking he probably had more than enough for a few more 8-pound anchors after this little project, but that's just me. There are also reports that the cement in his driveway was tested and that it didn't even match the cement that he had purchased. The boat that he purchased was noticeable as well for the depth finder that he insisted that it had to have. He claimed to need it to locate various kinds of fish, but when looking at everything that's out there put together, I am thinking he might have been looking for the deepest place to put his poor wife. Now, it may be important to note that there is a large group of people that believe that Scott is innocent. His defense's biggest case was the lack of physical evidence. There was a hair inside a pair of pliers on Scott's boat, Laci's hair, and I would say that's pretty significant, but no other major forensic evidence at all. So that does make it hard to prove guilt without a reasonable doubt. But when you look at his electronic trail, especially, and his behavior, lack of concern or empathy, it just adds up to guilty, at least in my mind, at very least of not giving a fuck about his dead wife and only son. But I'm fairly confident he did it. I don't think I mentioned that he did leave his wife a voicemail when he was coming home from fishing that day. So he thought to do that, but he did not try and get a hold of her phone at all when he realized that she was missing, which you would think he would do to cover the bases, but the fact that he didn't really just shows us he knew she was gone, among other comments that he made along the way. So he did an interview with Diane Sawyer before he was arrested, and here are a couple of highlights from that.
I think everybody sitting at home wants the answer to the same question. Did you murder your wife?
No, I did not. And I had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance. And use the word murder, and yeah, I mean, that is a possibility. It's not one we're ready to accept, and it creeps in my mind late at night and early in the morning. And during the day, all we can think about is the right resolution is to find her well.
Did you tell her that you were not married?
I did. And then when Laci disappeared, I called her, and admittedly it wasn't immediately. It was a couple days after Laci's disappearance. I telephoned her and told her the truth.
The truth?
That I was married, that Laci disappeared. She didn't know about it at that point. And then she contacted the police.
Were you in love with her?
No.
Was this the first time? Are there others out there?
No.
There's no one else who can come forward?
No.
Had you told anyone? Did you tell police?
Told the police immediately.
When?
That was the first night we were together. The police, I spent with the police.
You told them about her?
Yeah, from December 24th.
Did your wife find out about it?
I told my wife.
When?
In early December.
Why did you tell her?
It was the right thing.
Because again, you know that people sitting at home have imagined that either you were in love with someone else, therefore you decided to get rid of this entanglement, namely your wife and your child. Or there was just an angry confrontation.
Neither of those was the case. It's that simple.
What kind of marriage was it?
God, I mean, the first word that comes to mind is, glorious. I mean, we took care of each other very well. She was amazing. He is amazing.
You haven't mentioned your son.
It's so hard.
Wow. I think these are imperative when analyzing this case. Just the deadpan, straightforward lies he is spewing without even flinching. He even had to call the show after to correct some of his lies, like that he told the police about his affair with Amber right away. Now, I get that people can be nervous and want to look the best that they can in an interview, but he isn't stretching the truth here. And when someone can lie like that, it doesn't necessarily make them guilty, but it surely does make it so you can't believe a word that comes out of their mouth. There was also a notable burglary that took place that morning next door to their house, which was considered a lead in the investigation. It was possible that while Laci was walking her dog that she witnessed the burglary and was abducted and murdered by the burglars. That took place around 11 a.m. that morning, which would not line up with the time her dog was found. Now, witnesses are not always accurate on times and sightings, and many conflicting reports of Laci and even Scott walking their dog that morning were reported. So it's very hard to know who saw what. It's important to remember that these people probably wouldn't have thought twice about either of them walking the dog on that morning at that time, so the details would probably be a little foggy. But ultimately, when the suspects were brought into custody, it was determined that they had nothing to do with Laci's disappearance. Scott Peterson was convicted in 2004 of first-degree murder for the death of Laci and second-degree murder for the death of their son Connor. He was then sentenced to death, but this sentence was overturned in 2020, and he's now serving life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was also denied a retrial for the death of his wife and son. Amber would go on to have another child, although that relationship didn't work out, and in 2005 she published a memoir titled Witness for the Prosecution of Scott Peterson. Today she is active in her church and doing missionary work and still works as a massage therapist. This is what she has to say of the ordeal. Who I am today is a strong woman, a loving mother, a good friend. I am the person who travels halfway around the world to help people in their most desperate times of need. I feel that I am the one who gains from this experience. I am the woman who testified in court to give testimony of my knowledge for a missing woman and her unborn child. I am all of these things today. I can't wait to see what life has in the future for me and who I become in the next 10 years. I wish her nothing but the best. And that is going to do it for today's story. But as always, let's end today on a more positive note. So just last week, actually, there were some kayakers in the San Francisco Bay area who had all capsized and had to be rescued. Luckily, the 2 adults and 2 children were all okay, although 2 of them were taken to the hospital to be treated for hypothermia. Situations like that can be so scary, so thank God for the people who put their lives on the line to help those who need it. Anyways, let me know what you think about today's story in the comments below. Do you think that there's a chance that Scott is innocent? I mean, it's tricky with these cases because without the forensic smoking gun, he could be. But again, with someone who can lie like that, and the electronic trail, I'm thinking no. But what are your thoughts? And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe and please stay safe out there. Bye.